Games are, by and far, the most profitable form of entertainment, generating $184 billion annually, nearly double the combined revenue of movies and music. It has created more young millionaires than any traditional industry. And in 2028 is expected to reach up to $625.64 billion. There are about 1.4 billion gamers spread across the entire world, and a market expected to grow even larger. And one of the biggest names around is Nintendo. Nintendo began in 1889 Kyoto, founded by craftsman Fusajiro Yamauchi as Nintendo Kopai to manufacture Hanafuda, Japanese playing cards, or flower cards, primarily in Kyoto. No one really knows why it is called Nintendo, but speculation says that Nintendo means leave luck to heaven, as in work hard and let fate take the wheel. But not even Yamauchi's descendants know why it was named. The meaning behind Nintendo is just something lost to the fog of time. At this point in Japan's history, most gambling had been outlawed, but Hanafuda was left untouched, being popular in Yakuza-run gambling parlors in Kyoto. And while most manufacturers left to avoid becoming associated with criminality, Yamauchi held his ground and within a few years became the primary manufacturer of Hanafuda. Demand skyrocketed and he quickly found himself becoming overburdened. Yamauchi then hired assistants to help mass-produce products to meet demand, but still, the business faced financial struggles that came with the territory. A niche market means a smaller amount of buyers, lengthy and expensive manufacturing process means smaller returns on profit, high product price excludes lower-income people from buying, and the long durability of cards meant fewer customers needed to return to replace their cards. To solve all of these problems, Nintendo opened their Capitalism for Dummies book and found the solution. They began producing a line of cheaper and lower quality playing cards called Tengu, while also searching for newer markets in other cities such as Osaka, where card game profits were high. In addition, local merchants were interested in the prospect of continuously renewing their decks to avoid the suspicions that reusing cards would generate. These practices were enough to keep Nintendo afloat by 1929, when Yamauchi's son-in-law, Sekiro Kaneda, headed the business. Nintendo was the largest playing card business in Japan at this time, and they only continued growing from there. In 1953, Nintendo became the first company to succeed in mass-producing plastic playing cards in Japan. In 1959, they partnered with Walt Disney to incorporate his characters into playing cards, leading them into an era of prosperity. However, this also tied them to the children's market, which ultimately cost them money, only worsened by their adult playing card dwindling due to Japanese society moving to other hobbies such as pachinko, bowling, and nightlife. Then, the Disney sales began to dwindle, and with nowhere left to go, they needed another solution. It was also around this time that Ralph Baer at Sanders Associates Incorporated invented a prototype multiplayer, multi-program video game system, a lot of words, that could be played on a television known as the Brown Box. Baer, sometimes called the father of gaming, licensed his device to Magnavox. But in 1969, Yamauchi had hired a man named Gunpei Yokoi and increased Nintendo's investment in a research and development department before eventually making a games department. Due to his experience in manufacturing electronic devices, Yokoi became the head of his department, with his products being mass-produced. Under Yokoi, Nintendo released Japan's first electronic toy, the Beam Gun, before partnering with Magnavox to provide a light gun controller based on the Beam Gun design for the company's new home video game console, the Magnavox Odyssey, and thus marking Nintendo's unofficial entrance into the gaming world. Over the next several years, Nintendo restructured their business. They continued small, dedicated branches for card manufacturing, while also developing new arcade simulations, the first microprocessor for video game systems, acquiring the Japanese distribution rights for the Magnavox Odyssey, and expanding the team, including hiring a young Shigeru Miyamoto, who at the time was responsible for designing the casing for the Color TV game console. Even though setbacks like the 1973 oil crisis, losing them several billion yen, they still carried on, though not as well as they would have hoped. Once again, by the late 1970s, they were struggling financially. To escape this conundrum, they created a new department focused on arcade gaming when they created an American subsidiary in New York. Once more, they flourished with characters such as Donkey Kong and Jumpman, later named Mario, just before one of the biggest moments in gaming history. In the early 1980s, several video game consoles proliferated in the United States, as well as low-quality games produced by third-party developers, which oversaturated the market and led to the video game crash of 1983. Consequently, a recession hit the American video game industry, whose revenue went from over $3 billion to $100 million between 1983 and 1985. Nintendo initiative to launch the Famicom in America was also impacted. To differentiate the Famicom from its competitors in America, Nintendo rebranded it as an entertainment system and its cartridges as game packs, with a design reminiscent of a VCR. Nintendo implemented a lockout chip in the game packs for controls on its third-party library to avoid the market saturation that had occurred in the United States. The result is the Nintendo Entertainment System, or simply the NES, which was released in North America in 1985.
Will it be you? Will your family be the first to witness the birth of the incredible Nintendo Entertainment System? Will you be the first to see, to touch, to play with Rob, the extraordinary video robot? He follows the commands you put on screen to help you tackle even the toughest challenge. Will you be the first to raise the incredibly accurate Zapper and play games like Duck Hunt and Hogan's Alley? The first to build a library of game packs like Kung Fu and Golf, even games like Excitebike that you program yourself. Will you be the first to get all this in one package? The Nintendo Entertainment System, where video technology is more than a game.
It is at this point that Nintendo finally took the grand stage and became a worldwide powerhouse. They were the face of gaming. Super Mario Bros. Was such a big hit that studies at the time showed that children were as or more familiar with Mario as they were with Mickey Mouse and Bugs Bunny. Yet, when you look at their gaming history after this point, it may be surprising to learn that when new competition came around kicking off console wars, Nintendo lost nearly every single time. During the early days, when competing against the Sega Genesis had the advantage of a larger library and having access to more mature games, where Nintendo was still trying to focus on the children's market. And if we continue going on through console generations, Nintendo might make money from their console sales, as they always make a profit off of every sale. However, overall, they were losing to new competition from Sony and Microsoft. Admittedly, now with the Switch, Nintendo is able to hold on, but only because the gaming market has become quite a shit show, if I do say so myself. And Nintendo is consistent in what they do. And because of that, they are still able to make many sales on their Switch, which is currently dominating the market. But it is within this particular skill set of theirs where I take issue. That's simply because Nintendo doesn't make games, and they never have. Nintendo, forever and always, has only ever known how to make toys. Merriam-Webster defines toys as something for a child to play with. Something resembling a child's toy, especially in providing amusements or entertainment. That is to say, toys are simply things of no merit meant to entertain primarily children. Now, I'm sure there are many people who would agree and say, of course, video games are toys. That's what they've always been. That's why they're called games. I'm also sure those are the same people who think video games are too violent, and using them as a medium to honor your fallen comrades, like in 6 Days in Fallujah, is disrespectful because it inherently devalues the lives of those who died. I'm also sure these people are the same Disney adults who support shoddy, cheap cash grabs, such as all these live-action movies only meant to exploit children and their parents. So, to all of those people, I would ask you be just a tad bit open-minded. That being said, to understand the future, one must simply look to the past, and that's exactly what we've been doing this whole time. Because when you really look at Nintendo's history, it's obvious that this mindset is how they've always approached things. Much like Disney, Nintendo understands the business of families more than anything. That's even their stated business goal. Nintendo's continuing mission is to create reasons to choose Nintendo for unique, family-friendly entertainment that puts smiles on the faces of everyone it touches. They are fairly good businessmen, once upon a time, but I think our current era is showing that a business mindset is cheap and hollow, something people are losing a tolerance for. Nintendo remained in the business of making playing cards when everyone else was afraid of looking like criminals. Brave, yes, but mostly just good business. If there is still a clear desire for something, having all your competitors run away will make you the only competition in town, greatly increasing your profits. When the gaming market was crashing, Nintendo arrived to become the central force in an otherwise dwindling market once more. When the manufacturing costs became too high for their demands, they made cheaper, shoddier products that required replacement. Imagine being sold a $6 million banana on a wall with a lifespan of a few days rather than an oil painting with a lifespan of a few centuries. When they realized that their product only had one style, they reshuffled the style to continue selling the exact same product over and over again, obfuscated by different dressings. And when all that starts to dry up, jump ship and head to a new market. Nintendo's first foray into gaming was making a toy gun built for arcade games. And then they continued making those arcade games, which are notorious for being impossible to beat without forking over your hard-earned quarters to continue. They were I want to be the guy tough, and when they were and are faced with competition, they lose because they cannot produce quality. They make cheap fun through gimmicks that, in their games, are lost by the next installment, and on a console level only secure them hardware sales as shown by the Wii. And people who champion Nintendo as these great innovators often are so indoctrinated in simplicity that they think gimmicks equals innovation, when innovation is creating a solution to solve a problem, not creating fake motion controllers to create the appearance of something new and shiny. These same people also try to say Nintendo proves you don't need fancy graphics to make games, and funnily enough, I agree on this message, but not Nintendo demonstrating that. Games like Slay the Spire, Monster Train, Arknights, etc. show how to make a game without fancy graphics while still innovating in your field. Nintendo cheaps out on their hardware because that allows them to 1. Entice parents to buy their products so they can shut their kid up with the cheapest toy, and 2. Allows them to make a profit on all of their hardware sales. Like I said, they are the Disney of gaming, right down to making a business out of manufacturing nostalgia. Their target audience is children, and children who refuse to grow up. With their strong branding and recognizable characters like Mario, Zelda, Kirby, Pikachu, Pikmin, Animal Crossing, they can keep reselling the same characters in the same adventures over and over and over and over and over and over and over again and again and again and again and again and get away with it because people just want to go home and do nothing. And once again, they're looking for new markets to infect, like theme parks, and taking a second attempt at the film industry, which is suffering fairly greatly from practices by companies with similar ideas. And none of this would matter if they weren't such a big name in the gaming industry and what most non-gamers recognize as video games. Their powerful branding has kept people stuck in the 80s when gaming was still new and trying to find its identity. When people just associate Nintendo with gaming, what that does is ruin the reputation of gaming as something only for children and Nintendo adults. Gaming is not something to be taken seriously and has no inherent worth, and the people it will continue to attract are people of that mindset who aspire to create similar things, being toys for an audience desiring an escapist fantasy. But games are and can be so much more. At the end of the day, gaming is a medium to tell stories, making it art. The interactivity of games allows you, the person, to shape the story or experience the story at your pace. And games are unique in that there are several ways to go about artistic expression. I think nowadays everyone really knows The Last of Us, and while gamers considered it a masterpiece before, new viewers only know the story, which they themselves generally think of it in a positive light. The Last of Us tells a fairly simple story we've all seen before. Jaded man crushed by life is forced into some protective position over a girl who, over time, wears his wary heart down and becomes the daughter he lost, or maybe never had. Seen it a million times. But it still works. Even in the derivative zombie setting, because aside from being an easy people pleaser, it is told very well. But what the show cannot replicate is how it feels to interact with this world. Through the medium of gaming, you hear little conversational tidbits from Ellie and Joel while exploring the map. The quiet but meaningful music in the background allows you to hear the wind blowing and feel the calm emptiness of a city once full of life. The need to conserve your ammo and supplies creates the feeling of surviving after everything that once was has become overtaken by nature. Fighting a battle can take all your resources and force you to consider stealth versus a straight firefight, and if you play on the hardest difficulty, one death will delete your entire save, and the zombies hear even the small sounds of you kicking a brick. It's these small things that keep you immersed and feel the world as the characters feel the world. This is why it's a shame they made a second one, because the first one was already nearly perfect. It was more of a shame that they allowed Druckmann, the person who tried his best to ruin the first one, have so much control, considering the way he sees the ending sequence of the game is very much in line with the people I mentioned earlier who only see games as a form of entertainment. But I'm not going to complain about him. The Last of Us is just one example of demonstrating how powerful a medium games can be to tell a story. These games don't even need to be as loud as The Last of Us, which is still on the quieter side for games. It can be like Dark Souls, where most of the world and lore is understood through texts and journals on the side, and even if you ignore all the text and just play the game, you find very quickly how unforgiving everything around you is, how most of the people and creatures in the world just want to kill you, how you need more and more power to survive. And this is a game with multiple endings because those endings change the quiet narrative and recontextualize everything you're doing. Gamers are given the choice to relight the fire or let it die or absorb it into themselves. Dark Souls makes the argument that letting the fire die is the correct choice to end the cycle of these lingering gods, so long dead that they act on pure instinct rather than any mental faculty. This world is decayed and empty, and relighting the fire is merely an act of keeping everything maintained but not alive. Taking it for yourself is the ultimate selfish act, choosing to become a god and ultimately resigning your fate to end up like the other gods in the world, a lingering emptiness seeking more power for power's sake. Even quieter games, though, from before, like Shadow of the Colossus, have you travel a vast landscape and battle gods in an attempt to save your girlfriend, only for you to realize by the end that you were knowingly dooming the whole world in the process. NieR has you play the game once as normal before having you play a second time and hear the tragic stories of all the bosses you killed the first run through, making you sympathize and question what you're doing. Another anti-violence game, as many games actually are. If games were looked at and respected as carefully as movies or classic literature or other forms of media, the topic of can there really be an anti-war game where combat exists would definitely have come up in more culturally important spaces. God of War, the first one at least, is a Greek tragedy where Kratos seeks revenge against Ares for killing his wife and child, only to get that revenge and realize that nothing can save them. For that, he tried to take his own life and join them once more. Journey is highly accessible and very simple, but is a game where you, the player, can create so much meaning through your experience of the game, and the very simple messaging system that opens interactivity with other players. Because games allow a new way for people to experience art together. And while I could harp all day on this point, I just want to leave you with one more example that I think is quite important. In Spec Ops: The Line, you play the game as a group of soldiers heading further and further into a war zone. The deeper you go, the worse the conditions and the more strange things you see, and the game slowly shifts the entire time of you traversing deeper and deeper until you realize that the prospective character is unreliable and the war is all in the main character's head, for the most part. This is the gaming version of Heart of Darkness, or Apocalypse Now, and was translated to this medium with its strengths just as well as the story was portrayed in those other mediums. And this is a shooter, which is often seen as the genre where 8-year-olds scream into mics and shout slurs at their friends. This is really to demonstrate that games have had stories and experiences that are just as meaningful as any other art form. And the games I mentioned, for the most part, are not trying to hit you over the head with how artistic or meaningful they are. These games are both fun to play, engaging, and have deeper meaning for those who care to notice. They are more than just simple toys, because when being entertaining and catering to children are all you care about, then you can be replaced by anything doing the same thing. Nintendo has nothing unique to offer besides gimmicks, which get boring after the next gimmick appears. Gaming has been held back for decades by this reputation and stigma simply because the face of gaming has been holding it back and not tried to do anything meaningful all this time. And sure, I can't blame Nintendo for making money, but I do think we as a society should have a better grasp of what games actually are and be more open-minded for what they have to offer. Companies like Nintendo cheapen the value of art and turns it against us, the consumer. When they strip down experience and entertainment to its bare bones, there is nothing for anyone to grasp. It is only good to entertain and pacify the user so that your brain rots away more and more until it's incapable of imagining something better. This form of entertainment is prevalent in all forms of media today, from pretentious paintings with nothing to say other than they want your money and you're not smart enough to understand, from TV shows assuming their audience is too dumb to comprehend anything beyond surface-level thoughts, from games stripping away all the challenging gameplay and heart of a meaningful story for the sake of adding more microtransactions and culture war nonsense. All of this weaponizes art against us and obfuscates the true meaning behind art and why we make it, all for the sake of profit. And I'm not saying everything created needs to be some deep philosophical examination of the soul, but they all shouldn't be mindless, shallow products meant to be a toy purely for entertainment and pacification. There should also be a space to view games for the whole range of single-minded entertainment as well as artistic masterpieces, just as there is a space for the range of Michael Bay to our Francis Ford Coppolas in film. So when some games do try to expand the range of storytelling in games, they are not chastised for daring to leave the bubble expected of them. 6 Days in Fallujah, a game I mentioned earlier, was a game that was meant to portray a real-life event dedicated to the soldiers who lost their lives in the battlefield and was meant as an interactive memorial so people could truly understand the horrors of war and honor the fallen. But once the typical middle-aged soccer mom heard of it, they shamed it until it got canceled.
I have this image of a bunch of guys sitting around laughing because they got killed or they didn't get killed, or let's start over because we can. My son didn't have that choice.
Against all odds, though, nearly 2 decades later, the game found new life, and with that new life came new possibilities. With its release, the game was focused very intently on a realistic experience. The only issue is that the narrative elements of the game seem to have taken a dramatic shift, where once the game was meant to portray the lives of the soldiers on the front lines, divorced from the greater powers that be, now the game has documentary segments meant to capture the larger political machinations for how the conflict arose. It also is attempting to portray both sides so the game isn't US-centric in an ill attempt to avoid major controversy. My issue with this revival is that much of the immersion is taken out of the game. It is like going narratively from a first-person perspective to a third-person perspective, where the original idea sounded like you would be on the front lines with the soldiers that passed away, understanding the world and the battle through their eyes. Now, it seems like we play military simulations with documentary bits to contextualize the playing field. In other words, the story aspect has been replaced with lectures trying to tell, not show. Intimacy is lost, and individuals are swept up in a grand narrative that focuses on the greater forces, rather than be a story about people. And to me, that's a damn shame. From time to time, I wonder what that game could have been, and how it could have affected people playing it and shaped the perception of war and violence in video games, but we'll never know. And that is a tragedy. Until next time.